Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to AOPA's 2019 High School Aviation STEM Symposium. The program will begin in 2 minutes. Please take your seats.
Tell me when you're stoked to start. Are you ready for tonight? Setting it on fire and we'll dance until we're dumb in the dark. My lady, I know what you're thinking when the bass starts ringing. Can you tell me when you're stoked to start? Are you ready for tonight? Setting it on fire and we'll dance until we're dumb in the dark. Are you break me down, dirty jokes. Watch me deep and say what you want to know. Beauty lies within the eyes of the beholder. I'll be holding you close all night. I won't forget you, but I may forget your name. My lady, I know what you're thinking when the bass starts ringing. Can you tell me when you're stoked to start? Are you ready for tonight? Setting it on fire and we'll dance until we're dumb in the dark. My lady, I know what you're thinking when the bass starts ringing. Can you tell me when you're stoked to start? Are you ready for tonight? Setting it on fire and we'll dance until we're dumb in the dark. Are you break me down, I'm ready, break me down. 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 I won't forget you, but I may forget your name.
I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, take your seats. The program is beginning.
Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision. Always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Mama said, fulfill the prophecy, be something great. Don't make a legacy, manifest destiny. Back in the days we wanted everything, wanted everything. Stay up on that rise, stay up on that rise, never come down. Oh, stay up on that rise, stay up on that rise, never come down. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living. Didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes.
Y'all coming with me? Let's go.
Always had high hopes.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AOPA's Executive Director, You Can Fly, Elizabeth Tennyson.
Thank you. And good morning to all of you on this unbelievably cold and snowy day in Denver. We got so lucky yesterday for the Academy tours that we didn't have this weather, and I understand it's going to get a lot better. So thank you for enduring with us this morning. I really love that video, and I think it strikes the perfect note as we start the 5th annual AOPA High School Aviation STEM Symposium. High hopes! We're here today because we share those high hopes. We've got high hopes for our schools, we've got high hopes for our students, and of course, we've got high hopes for the future of aviation. Before we continue, I would like to take just a brief moment on this Veterans Day to acknowledge the very many people here who have served our country. Would you please stand so that we can recognize you? Wow. Thank you. Thank you all so much for your service. We're here today because of what you've done for us. This symposium is really a meeting of the minds. It's an extension of the great work that all of you do all year long to prepare and to mentor the next generation of aviation and aerospace professionals. I want to thank you all for being here. I know it is not easy to take time from your classrooms and to attend an event like this, so your presence here today is a real measure of your commitment, and we appreciate it. I also want to extend my sincere gratitude to all of the presenters and sponsors and exhibitors who make this possible. The next couple of days are going to be filled with amazing speakers, great experiences, and networking opportunities. It's going to be the best year yet. But before we get started, please join me in recognizing our host sponsor, United Airlines, with a round of applause. You know, United has been an incredible partner in this year's symposium, and some of you are going to get a really unique experience today as you go and explore this flight training center behind the scenes. This is the largest facility of its kind in the entire world. And at this time, to tell you a little bit more about the facility and offer some words of welcome, I'd like to invite Captain Mike McCaskey to the stage. He is the Managing Director of Flight Training for United Airlines.
Hey, good morning. On behalf of the 90,000 employees at United Airlines around the world, welcome to the 2019 Aircraft Owners and Pilots Symposium STEM Symposium. United is proud to be the sponsor of this year's symposium here in Denver, home of our Flight Training Center. And as Elizabeth mentioned, we are the largest single-site training location in the world, soon to house 40 simulators, currently filled with 32 simulators, operating 60,000 training events a year, 415 hotel rooms a night. Every United pilot will visit this facility at least once and sometimes twice a year based on their training schedule. We are excited to be part of this special day and an opportunity to support and promote AOPA's mission and curriculum programs. At United, we are committed to investing in our communities and inspiring future generations of leaders. We strive to break down barriers by maximizing engagement and treating diversity and inclusion as a core leadership competency. One of the drivers of United's diversity and inclusion strategy is to attract, develop, and retain talent, and also ensure that our employees represent the marketplaces we serve. United was just ranked as one of the top 50 workplaces by Indeed, placing us among the best and the most innovative companies when it comes to employee engagement and culture. We continue to strengthen our partnership with universities and continue the important work with our career path programs. You will hear more about that today in the recently announced Aviate program during our Leading in Career Aviation panel. At this year's event, we are excited to welcome you to our booth at the DoubleTree, and to offer support and advice as you navigate through your students' questions and challenges around an aviation career. The successful completion of programs like these are critical to United's future and success as we continue our mission to connecting people and uniting the world. Thank you for your attendance over the next 2 days and the critical role that you will play helping us to build and create an aviation and aerospace group that will allow us to succeed into the future. Lastly, as was mentioned earlier, we'd like to thank our veterans. United has a huge presence in the military and with our folks in the DOD, and not a day goes by where we don't think and thank our veterans. So thank you all. I would be remiss if I didn't ask who's in school today, but I'll let that go. And then lastly, I would just like to thank you for what you are about to do for the next generation of aviation professionals. Thank you and have a wonderful symposium.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you again to all of you at United. Our presenting sponsor and another key AOPA partner throughout the year is Boeing. Thank you, Boeing, for all that you do to support our STEM efforts and all of our other programs to grow and support the pilot population. This year, for the first time, this symposium is completely sold out. And while we wish we could have accommodated everybody who wanted to be with us in person today, we really are excited to be able to offer all of our general sessions on live streaming, sponsored by the United States Air Force. So if any of you have colleagues who would like to join us, all you need to do is point them to the AOPA STEM Symposium website, have them click on Watch Keynotes Live, and of course, some of them are out there right now. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who are joining us online. Thank you for being here. Another special thank you to our breakfast sponsor this morning, Redbird Flight Simulators. I hope all of you got to spend a little bit of time with our exhibitors this morning during breakfast, or maybe yesterday evening. And we're going to have lots more opportunities to do that. Take advantage of it. They've got some great things to share with all of you. We're also going to get to spend some time with them at dinner tonight. And for that, I'd like to thank American Airlines. Their ongoing support of this event is very important to us. And you're not going to want to miss our dinner opportunity tonight to spend time continuing your learning and your sharing with your colleagues. Even with all those wonderful sponsors, we've gotten a lot more help. There are a host of others who are showing their support for aviation STEM education this week. Piedmont Airlines, Envoy Air, Kansas State University Polytechnic Campus, the National Business Aviation Association, the California Aeronautical University, Lift Academy, and Blue Sky Educational Foundation. Let's thank all those sponsors with a quick round of applause. During our presentations today, we want to encourage you to interact with our speakers. So we've got microphones set up on both sides of the room. Please don't be shy. I know they want to hear your questions and your perspectives. And we also want to encourage you to leverage social media while you're here with us. Hashtag AOPA STEM 19. Go ahead and post your pictures. I don't know if some of you have been out using the green screens. Those are a lot of fun. Post those, share your thoughts, and we're going to do the same because we want people to know we're really serious about aviation STEM education. We do have a small programming change that I want to let you all know about. Astronaut Ricky Arnold is not going to be able to join us tomorrow. He had a family emergency, and he was very, very sorry that he couldn't be with us. But we are going to be joined by a very exciting guest speaker, the former commander of the United States Air Force Thunderbirds, Kevin Robin. Let's take a quick look.
Mama said, fulfill the prophecy, be something great. Go make a legacy, manifest destiny. Back in the days, we wanted everything, wanted everything. Mama said, burn your biographies, rewrite your history, light up your wildest dreams, museum victories. Every day, we wanted everything, wanted everything. Mama said, don't give up.
So Kevin is going to give us the gouge about what that really feels like. They are flying these maneuvers 18 inches off of each other's wings, sometimes at speeds over 400 miles an hour. So seeing that, I'm pretty excited to hear what Kevin has to share with us. But you know, he's just one of the great speakers that you're going to hear from over the next couple of days. We're going to explore opportunities for students to become part of some of the most exciting trends that are emerging in aviation and aerospace. So fasten your seatbelts. You're not going to want to miss any of it. It's now my pleasure to introduce someone who knows just how much of an impact aviation can make in the lives of young people. He describes himself as an airport kid. He used to ride his bike down to the airport and wash airplanes in exchange for an occasional ride in one. He learned to fly while he was still in high school, and he never looked back. Now, with thousands of hours of flight time and a real passion for giving a new generation of kids the chance to experience aviation for themselves, he's the president and CEO of AOPA. Please welcome our own Mark Baker.
Well, it is my pleasure to be here with you today and share what I think is the next generation of aviation, how you make a difference, how you're going to change the world for these young people and their access and their knowledge to aviation. It has been a pleasure to me, and it's hard to believe it was that long ago that I was sitting in one of your classrooms. I probably would have gotten detention often. Do they still have that? I was one of those kids that really couldn't pay much attention other than my aviation class, which I did to my ground school in the 11th grade in 1974 in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. And it did change my life. So you are changing young people's lives, I guarantee it. But today I want to share a little bit with a fellow I'm going to introduce in a minute here, Bryan Quigley, who's the Senior Vice President here of United Airlines, their operations side. He's going to talk a little about his role, what it means about all the roles in aviation, not just the ones flying the front of it, because it takes a team to fly aircraft all over the world. It takes a team to keep these things moving. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of expensive lawn art without mechanics, service people, dispatchers, leaders, accountants in aviation. So when I'm here to talk about those, think about this company today, United Airlines. 12,600 pilots in the global operations. Bryan joined in 1995, has flown everything that they have at United Airlines other than the 787. Before joining United, he was a counter-narcotics pilot as well as a naval aviator. So I want to welcome Bryan Quigley, who I spent a little bit of time with in Washington, D.C., working on the Next Gen Advisory Committee. But Bryan, come up here and let's chat a little bit what's going on at United Airlines. Welcome, Bryan. Well, you know everybody here?
I know a few. I'm a little worried that my high school teachers might be here.
They're probably retired by
Some
now.
of them are still kicking.
So this is an impressive facility, and obviously it takes a lot of capital. But what really drives United's need to have a facility like this, and maybe get educate people, and all the other airlines have similar facilities, but this is the largest in the world. Tell us a little about it.
Yeah. So we have a full-service flight training facility here. Mike McCaskey, who you just heard speak, is entrusted to run this, and he does a magnificent job. We have 12,600 pilots, as you mentioned. We use what's called an advanced qualification program to train our pilots and keep them standardized. And in an operation like this, safety has to be the forefront of everything that you do. And so for the pilots, it's really dependent on standardization. Every pilot does something exactly the same way. We often get in the cockpit with each other, having never flown with each other. And the dynamics of managing through complicated systems, using checklists to be standardized, our call-outs, how we engage in briefs and debriefs to learn what we've done well and what we need to do better on the next leg is really key to us. So Mike has a group that oversees the 5 fleets that we have. As he mentioned, we have 32 simulators. We'll have 40 once the G building is complete, which is over on the other side of the campus. As soon as we get that built, we're growing so fast that once we get it fully outfitted with the other 8 additional simulators, we'll have to begin construction on a new building, the H building, to put additional simulators in there. We have a group of flight training instructors who manage our ground school type approach that most of the pilots here would be familiar with. We have our pilot instructors who are pilots that fly for United Airlines when they're not teaching. We have evaluators that check the work of what the instructors do. And then we have a group of line check airmen and a standards group here in the building that go out and fly with our pilots to make sure that we're complying with all of our procedures. And so in flight operations, we have a $4.7 billion budget. Most of that is wrapped up in pilot salary. Good to know for those who are interested in being a pilot. But almost the rest of it is dedicated to running this facility here. It's just a huge operation. And as you mentioned, it's capital intense to be able to do something like this. The investment is huge, but we need to make the investment in our simulators to support the airplanes that are out there flying around the world.
I think it is one of the things is sitting as a passenger in the back of an airliner. People forget about all the training that goes on. One of the reasons why the U.S. has the best safety record in commercial aviation is because of facilities like this. Right. It's been really rewarding to see that make a difference over the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, well, thanks for that comment. We absolutely have to be able to fly the airplanes, and I think, you know, the trend has been towards more automation, but what we need our pilots to be able to do is to be able to fly the airplane when the automation's not working and know how to interact with the airplane, and so we're working really hard here at United Airlines for our pilots to be able to do that.
Really important. So tell me a little about your career and what got you interested in aviation in the first place. So a lot of us want to share a little about that and what that meant in your early days.
Yeah, sure. So I never flew an airplane until I got into the United States Navy. I grew up with my mom and my stepdad. My stepdad had been a Navy pilot during the Korean War, which was before I came along. He had a couple of events that he thinks may have caused him from pursuing a career in aviation. He got shot down a couple times, and one time he bailed out over Korea and was picked up by a recon platoon in the Marine Corps. He tells people he's still working, still kicking, and doing well. He tells people that he was captured by the Marines, and then the second time he had to ditch at sea, and he said, look, I'm just running out of options, so I don't want to fly these things anymore. But I grew up hearing these stories. I went to college in North Carolina, and at one point I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I realized that although I like to read, I don't like reading what people tell me to read. So there was a Navy recruiter there, and I just signed up and joined the Navy at that point. So I'd say that Pop was very instrumental in that decision. My mother was too, although she had some different opinions about being in the Navy as a young person. And then, you know, so I spent 10 years on active duty, 20 years in the reserve. A lot of that time is concurrent with United Airlines. I went and flew for U.S. Customs doing counter-narcotics down in Central and South America. And it's important for the audience to know that every step of the way, there was somebody instrumental in my life that was really forcing the foundation of education along the way. And you look at this industry and what we're doing, not only for the pilots, but for every touch point within the industry. We need people that are trained in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Like you said, it is interesting. All of us that have been lucky enough to be involved in aviation, there's been people and mentors that have helped us along the way. Yeah. And we wouldn't get there without it. And a lot of these teachers and educators here are just those kind of people that spark that interest. And it's really important. But as your day job now, you've got 48 countries that you guys ping.
That's right.
4,900 daily flights. What could go wrong?
Yeah, you know, I can't worry about that. There are times when I miss out on a good night's sleep, but you know, we have to build the foundation and the leadership to be able to run this operation. At an airline, every airline has a certificate. The FAA manages that certificate to make sure that you're running a safe and reliable operation. And there are 5 people named on that certificate that the FAA holds accountable for different aspects of the job. And so one of them is the Director of Operations, and I'm the Director of Operations on the certificate for United Airlines. And so what that means is that they want to keep the commercial revenue generating side separate from the safe, efficient operation of the airline. So I'm responsible for the operations side, and I have to fend off the revenue generation side on occasion to make sure that we're doing things safely. So, you know, you mentioned that we have the safest air travel industry in the world, transportation system in the world. We learn from every mistake. We go back and review everything. We build that into our systems. We use a safety management system that the FAA now requires of all airlines. And all of this is based on experience and education. And, you know, I just have to have faith that those that came before us have done the right thing. And we're really fortunate at United Airlines to have Oscar as our CEO and Scott as our president. And they're really incredible leaders. They trust me to be able to tell them when we need to do something or not do something. And so I feel completely unconstrained in making sure that we're running the operation effectively.
So, part of the deal is onboarding people every day, every year in this organization, because 90,000 employees in the company today.
Yes, sir.
What is it like for got to be a scary first day in the job for either a new pilot or a new person in United Airlines? And how do you help acculturate those people into the programs and what you consider to be success for United Airlines? How do you bring them on board?
Yeah, so we generate most of our pilots that we hire come from either express carriers or the military. It used to be that about 51% of our pilots came from the military. It's half that or less now. The demands for the military have significantly increased over the last decade and then last 2 decades. And then, they're trying to retain their pilots as much as we are. And if for the Air Force, Navy, Army, Marine crowd out there, Coast Guard crowd, when I get asked, hey, should I leave the military and join an airline? I always tell them, look, I want you to serve as long as you're able to, as long as you're willing to, but as soon as you make that decision to leave the service, we'll gladly take you. So I try not to recruit for, not to compete with the needs of the service, but for a new pilot that comes into United Airlines, from my experience was I came from the military and I thought I was really well trained. I flew P-3s, which at the time was a maritime reconnaissance and patrol airplane. It's a big airplane, it's a crew environment, and so I felt like I was really well prepared, but the pace of the operation here is just extreme. And the ability to get up to speed quickly and learn quickly is really important for our pilots. And so they come from whatever career background they came, whether it's military or one of the express carriers or corporate flying somewhere. And they come for 2 weeks of basic NDOC, and they learn really a lot of cultural onboarding type stuff that any corporation would do, but they also start building the foundation of what it takes to learn the systems that they're going to have to fly. Once they complete basic NDOC, and it's typically a crowd of about 30 pilots, they'll go to aircraft-specific training, and that's all seniority-based. They'll bid for it. And typically our pilots are learning the 737 or the Airbus 319 and 320 to start with. We will also put some in the 756, which is an international operation and has a little bit more learning curve to it because they're flying international operations. But they'll go through about 6 weeks of aircraft-specific training. That's a qualification course using AQP or Advanced Qualification Program, which I mentioned before, and it's trained to proficiency. So they'll go through that course in about 6 weeks, get qualified, go through a line of flying experience and get a check ride, and then they'll go out to the fleet and fly with a check airman, typically about 25 hours with a check airman to make sure that everything that they've done and learned at the training center is validating our standards. And after that, they're released to go flying. They're typically beyond reserve at that point where they're just waiting for a phone call to come fill in for either a snowy operation. Today we have snow here in Denver and in Chicago, so we'll rely heavily on our reserve pilots because the pilots that are flying the normal schedule will be delayed, and so we'll call out the reserves to pick up the flying. But that's typically what they see.
That's a great way to get started. But you think about the numbers here. The 2019 pilot outlook indicates there's a demand for almost 650,000 pilots globally over the next 20 years. And even in North America, about 220,000 pilots alone in North America. We've been talking about whether it's a shortage or where they are in the pipeline, because I think there are a lot of people who want to fly and can and have the capacity to do it. We have to create those pathways. But how do you think about the hiring needs and what that looks like compared to, when I was first being involved as an aviator in the 70s, we were consolidating cockpits, airlines were consolidating themselves, but there were 3 crews in a lot of those planes, and those jobs went away. But today, I think it's probably as good as I've ever seen it in my 40 years of flying. What do you see? Yeah,
I agree. We went through a really difficult period after September 11th. A lot of consolidation in the industry, a lot of bankruptcies for the airlines. I think that the consolidation has made the airlines more healthy. It's left a lot of debris along the way, but for the most part, the airlines are running efficiently, effectively, they're generating revenue, and they're improving their quality standards around customer service, which is extremely important. I do believe that the demand is intense for pilots, and I do believe that there is a pilot shortage out there. And it used to be when I spoke to people, when I was the chief pilot for the airline, when I spoke to people on our executive team about the pilot shortage, I think that they felt like that the pilot shortage was present with our express carriers, but not so much with the main line. And they felt that we would always be able to hire from the express carriers, which is true, but we're a network carrier, so we rely on our express carriers. There's just some places where the main line will not fly to because we can't do it and generate enough margin to reinvest in the business. So we will have express carriers. And to be able to be a network carrier, we're going to have to find a way to source pilots into those express carriers. So Mike mentioned the fact that we've just developed a program called Aviate. Aviate is a way for us, and I won't spoil the thunder because I know that you're going to hear a lot more about it later, but Aviate's a way for us to have multiple inputs into our pilot ecosystem. It's going to be really important that we keep this throughput healthy, which means we need middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities to prepare these students to be able to handle these jobs. And I'm not just talking about pilot jobs.
Right.
It's also important for every other job in the industry. And I can talk a lot more about that, Mark.
Yeah, there's millions of jobs available in aviation coming in, and the lifetime earnings today are as good as they've ever been.
Yes.
From a career, from income, and the opportunities are endless across the spectrum. So it's nice to see that. How many pilots do you think you guys will hire in the next decade?
Yeah, right now, I mean, I think it's going to be more than the number that we publicly state, but we're advertising that we need to hire about 10,000 pilots in the next decade.
Wow.
And I think it'll be more than that, because if you couple the growth that Scott Kirby, our president, has us on, we indicate that we're going to grow at 4 to 6% per year. And the number of retirements and the growth and then the expansion, we're just going to need a lot of pilots. So 10,000 plus.
And then you think about the mechanics and the service people, and I've been to your headquarters in Chicago and the dispatch and all the things that is going on there. I mean, you probably will have, of the 90,000 people here today, over the next 20 or 30 years, they all turn over again, right?
Yeah. Yes. We need new blood, new talent, constantly entering the doors of United Airlines. And we need them in unique areas that most people don't think about for aviation. I mean, if you think about just the environmental aspects, Scott Kirby has committed that we'll reduce carbon emissions by 50% at United Airlines by 2050. That's an enormous task if you think about it. We have a large carbon footprint, but if you think about the engineering that it requires to be able to pull something like that off, it's going to be huge. We've just made another $40 million investment in a biofuel technology group. And if you think about, just think about the engineers it takes to support something like that. The innovation in technology, the science around that, the engineering. We were talking earlier about what it's going to take to improve the operation at 3 of our most complex hubs, which are San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. Things like enhanced vision, where pilots have the capability to see through weather and see through clouds, and that technology exists today. And in a lot of cases, you can't buy a business jet without some of this technology, and I know some of our AOPA brothers and sisters are out there flying with it too on their airplanes. Mm-hmm. We need those in the cockpits of our airliners as well. So, being really precise on aircraft weight and balance, the center of gravity, all of these things are going to be key to our success in flying efficiently out there. And so I could talk for hours on the need for science and engineering in this industry.
Well, I think that's part of where I want to keep going with, though, is that, you look back 10 years and you look forward 10 years. The things that have changed and the things that are the most challenging, passenger expectations are moving always. I've been in the retail business, and customers are always trying to find the new value proposition, and you have to adapt to where the customer wants to go to, not where they've been. But those are challenges for the industry: loading, unloading, baggage, non-bags. Tell me about how you guys think about that and prioritize, and how that would be important for people as they want to think about joining United Airlines or the airline industry.
Yeah, you saw the video that we played at the beginning, at the opening of the session here, and so, our focus is connecting people and uniting the world, and the thing I think that most airlines haven't done well is really focus on what the customer wants, and in the this day and age of social media where everything is present right away as soon as it happens. We've learned a lot of lessons over the last couple of years, but we're making huge investments in the customer experience. So we've guided to Wall Street that will maintain flat CASM, which is our method of measuring cost. So CASM is cost per available seat mile. That's the denominator for the math teachers out there, and then the cost goes above that. And so, we are trying to make sure that we can reinvest in our business to take care of the customer. And so we're going to set aside a large portion of our revenue to be able to invest in aircraft and in the customer experience in our airports. And it's top of mind in everything that we're doing. We've implemented guiding principles called Core 4, which are safe, caring, dependable, and efficient. And I think it's unique for an airline the stature of United Airlines to say that caring is our number 2 priority. Safety really has to be the number 1 priority and always will be. But caring is more important than dependability and efficiency. Now, we do know that the most important measurement in customer satisfaction is getting our passengers to their destination on time and safely. And so dependability is important, but we need to be able to reinvest in the business. And because airlines are making money now, we are able to reinvest.
It's good to see those investments go back into the business and for the growth and for doing it the right way. I think, I've lived through a lot of retail companies, and sometimes when you get challenged, you become your best because now you've focused on what the opportunities are and get everybody aligned. And I see that at your organization as well as across the industry. The industry for years didn't have a good return on capital.
Right.
But today you've got a reasonably good return on capital. But yet as we think about the future and what are the constraints in aviation and airline world, you and I sit on the Next Gen Advisory Committee where we've got a bunch of technologies that are now being in place, a big one coming up here in January 2020 with ADS-B. But there are other constraints in our world, of whether it's air traffic control or concrete availability or regulatory, or as you mentioned, emissions potentially, or noise. What are the ones that you think about that have the most likelihood to have the biggest challenges to your organization and to aviation?
Yeah, all those are really important. I think number 1 is talent acquisition and having people that are trained and prepared to operate in this complex environment. To me, that's number 1. Number 2 is that we need to learn to be able to operate the airline in difficult weather. And so with climate change, we are seeing more impact. We've got 7 hubs. 3 of those hubs are extremely complex. And because we have 7 hubs across the continent, a big operation in Guam, big operation in Asia and Europe, we are exposed to weather on a daily basis. Today, 2 of our biggest hubs are having snow. And so there are going to be times when we just can't operate. Those times are typically when the convective weather makes it unsafe to do so, or potentially when icing exceeds the capability of the aircraft and the airport staff to be able to de-ice airplanes. But beyond that, we should be able to operate. And we need to find ways to make the bad weather days look more like the good weather days. The weather doesn't care if a passenger is going to a wedding or a funeral or whatever, and it's our job to get the passengers to their destination safely. And so we're just going to have to learn and figure out ways to be able to operate when the weather's more difficult. And we need you to help us train those people here's your call to action from me. I need you to help train those people that will discover new technologies and to be able to help us manage the risk out there in the operation.
Your headquarters in Chicago, how many meteorologists do you have? You have quite a few.
We do. We contract with the weather company, which is WSI, which is part of the weather company. My wife actually manages that group of people. Mark knows her. She worked at the FAA before she came to United. Her name's Susan. And so she's responsible for air traffic strategy and meteorology. And she's up every morning really early, especially when we have weather at two of our big hubs. And so we have, it's a large group of people. I don't know the exact number, but we have 30 or 40 individuals dedicated to calling the weather for us.
And they get it wrong sometimes too, right?
They do,
Yeah,
yes.
I would think so.
Yeah.
So, you know, we marked the 5th year of this symposium, and I'm really proud of the AOPA's organization and the team that pulls these things together, but mostly proud of you and your attendance and commitment to doing these curriculum kind of evaluations, trying to make sure that we're getting what we want done here. I've gone off and for the last 5 years raised money with the foundation team at AOPA and the leadership in the You Can Fly program. And as I stand in front of donors around the country and talk about, you know, why this is really important. These educators care about this, the students care about this, but ultimately it has to create people that are capable of jobs in the future. And raised tens of millions of dollars to get this program up and running. We got one more year to get the 12th grade done, and it'll be constantly evaluated and improved from here on out. But as you think about it, Bryan, you know, you think about STEM, what it means to a pilot, what it means to other people in careers in aviation. And, you know, it's different than when you and I were trying to get to algebra, I think, whatever I was trying to get through at the time. But how does United and yourself think about the application of STEM education and what it might mean for aviation careers?
Yeah, I'll separate the pilots from the rest of the workforce. For the pilots, the foundation has to be there. I remember in my 12th grade calculus 3 class, Mrs. West in Spruce Creek, Florida. She was an incredibly caring and compassionate person, but she was also laser focused on the quality of education for her students. And she really impressed upon me and a bunch of my classmates the need to really push ourselves. My parents raised 2 of my older brothers are doctors. I have a little sister who's a doctor. Mom loves me best. Love me. But you know, I think about how, you know, my background and the way my family really focused on this, and to me it truly is the foundation for what we need in terms of talent at United Airlines. And so for the pilots, they're flying aircraft through airspace at, you'll read, and if you read any of our information, the 787 flies 560 miles per hour. And if it's got a 100-knot tailwind, that's approaching 700 miles an hour. You have to think quickly, it has to be natural, it has to be ingrained in everything you do to be able to keep up with the programming of the computers in the airplane and to think ahead about what you're gonna have to do to fly a safe approach once you get to your destination. Even rolling down the runway at almost 200 knots, making that split-second decision, you know, it has to be ingrained. This has to be an incredibly disciplined environment. And to me, that STEM background gives those pilots that disciplined background. Aside from the pilots, every aspect of our business has some connection with this program, with STEM. And, you know, I mentioned the environmental aspect, but it's our tech ops team, technical operations, which is the maintenance team. So we're using predictive and prescriptive analytics in a way that we've never done before in the airline. We'd like to be able to find out when a part's going to fail on the airplane and take it off just prior to failure rather than waiting until it fails and causes a diversion in flight. And so the analytics around that are intense. And so we need people that can think like that. Just from a sales perspective, the analytics around you know, the sales perspective for our sales team is huge. I will say this though, I went to Kellogg Business School and took a big data class, and there were people from all over the world there that were largely a sales group. Myself was there, and then the guy who would be the equivalent of the Moneyball person for the Cubs was also there. The only thing that anybody wanted to talk about was aviation and the Cubs. They didn't really care about sales, but all of that was around analytics and our approach to solving problems in the airline. And to me, from an analytics perspective, we ought to be able to tell you, based on the visibility, how many airplanes we're going to be able to get into the airport in an hour. We should be able to do that much sooner. But because weather moves at its own pace, the timing and the intensity of the weather is really important. So from a science perspective, if you can figure out the physics of airflow and heat transfer and the way that impacts the environment and the way it's going to impact the operation over the airfield, that type of science is really important to us. So those are a few things that are kind of present in my mind.
That's a lot of opportunity. But what I'd like to remind people, we'll be asking the opportunity to ask questions. There's a microphone over there and one here. If you want to queue up now, they've got a couple more questions to get Bryan. But we really have some questions from the audience, if you're willing to participate in that. But I think, as I've been an aviator for a long time, and the technologies that have changed and the things that are wonderful, I mean, fuel efficiency on jet engines have gone up by, 30, 40, 50% over the last 30 years, 40 years. Noise has gone down. Tell me how you feel about what you're seeing, what you think you're going to see in the future from a technology and passenger movement then.
Yeah, we absolutely need to continue to improve the efficiency of our aircraft. So I look at the older aircraft in our fleet, currently the Airbus, which is a much smaller airplane than the 787. The fuel burn on those two airplanes is roughly the same. But 787 is going to travel across the world. I got back from Australia a couple of weeks ago, and we flew a 787 from San Francisco to Sydney, and it's just amazing that we do that. To me, I just love it. I do have the best job in the world, by the way. But we have to get better in efficiency. Our airplanes have to be sustainable. We have to look for technologies that allow us to continue to move passengers around the world in a very efficient way. And so, it's not only what aircraft we fly, but how we fly them. The best way that we can be more efficient is to reduce minutes en route or the time that the airplane is traveling. So a couple of us here in the audience have worked on the Next Gen Advisory Committee, as Mark said. And so the best thing that we can do to support efficiency in the environment and other things is to reduce the amount of time it takes to go from point A to point B. And right now there's a lot of slop built into the system because our air traffic system is pretty old, and it's not all connected in a way that it makes it synthesized so that all the systems are talking to each other. We need programmers and engineers to be able to fix these legacy systems and improve them in a way that is going to make them much more efficient and allow us to operate.
Yeah, we certainly know that a lot of the delays that do unfortunately happen when you get to weather like this, or icing conditions, or convective thunderstorming, and then you've got that Northeast corridor that is you and I are working on with the whole Next Gen group, because about half of all the delays in the country kind of emanate
That's right.
out of there, and we've got to work together to figure out how do we do that with best equipment and allocations, because it seems like everybody wants to get to New York at 4 p.m. and leave at 8 a.m. or whatever it is. And those are challenges that all of us in aviation face. But I do think the industry is working as an aviation community, business, general aviation, the Department of Defense, and the airlines, in my opinion, is working as hard together about trying to solve this thing. So we can become as efficient getting people from point A to point B as quick as they can, which means airplanes have to get up high fast and get down on their approach, whether it's visual or not.
Right.
These are things that are ahead of us, but there are a lot of programs that I believe that were invested in 15, 20 years ago. We're just starting to bear fruit on. The datacom, where you're gonna be able to push messages back and forth. Today, if you get on a frequency around Chicago, it is really hard sometimes to get in word edgewise,
Yes,
because there's so many planes trying to talk to people on the ground. But now today they're shoving those messages basically up into the instruments into the airplane,
Right.
and you say yes or no.
Yeah.
It's really just pretty new.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, part of Scott Kirby, our president's growth plan, is to connect more passengers. And if we're going to grow the way that we need to grow, we're a network carrier, so our job is to connect passengers in our hub, and we expand the world opportunity for people to travel, the opportunity for people to travel around the world by doing that. But as we've rebanked, so a bank is when airplanes arrive at the hub and then depart at a hub, and we typically at a hub, we would have 8 banks or so. We just want to connect more airplanes in and more planes to depart. But as we've done that, what we've seen is the congestion on the radios, just simple things like pilots calling for pushback with ground control or with our ramp towers that we operate, has caused a lot of frequency congestion because we need to be operating at the same time. So we need technology like digital datacom where the pilots can signal that they're ready, and when it's time to push, they get transmitted a message, an alert goes off in the cockpit, they tell the ground guy, okay, we're ready to go.
Yep. It's exciting. So anybody have questions out here? There's a microphone here, microphone over here. We want to make sure. Yes, sir. Get to the microphone.
Hi. So I have a quick question. The Boeing 737 MAX scandal had two components, right? So Boeing failed, and that's like a long saga and essentially covered up just a bunch of bad practices and bad design, et cetera. And then the FAA failed to do its job. So my question is, for you running an airline, how does your airline or your airline's ability to do its job, right, and then like become affected by the fact that you have two really important partners, right, airplane manufacturer and federal regulation organization that both failed, right? I mean, you have to be able to trust those people. So I'm just really curious as to how that impacts what you do, you know, at a very fundamental level.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. Why am I not surprised that that was the first question that came up? Let me say this. We do have the safest aviation system in the world, and it's built on a lot of good work that OEMs or airline or airplane manufacturers and the regulators have put together. I think the MAX event was a seminal moment in aviation for us in the United States and around the world. Not all is known about the mishaps that the reports are just now coming out. The Lion Air mishap has just now been published, and the Ethiopia mishap, final mishap report's not out yet. And so we will learn more as we analyze the information in those mishap reports. I would say that what you're reading in the media may not all be factual about what's been happening in the investigations and as it relates to Boeing, and certainly not with the FAA. Now, that being said, we need to learn from it, right? We need to design airplanes. Boeing has said that it had a single point of failure with the angle of attack system, which fed into a critical component of the airplane. They will resolve that with a technical resolution. I've been engaged with the FAA, with Boeing, with international regulators and international carriers at meetings around the world since March. I took the job on March 1st, and the second mishap happened on March 10th. This has pretty much been my life since then. United Airlines has 14 737 MAX airplanes. We're going to get more. That airplane will be safe when it returns to service, and we won't fly that airplane until it's safe. And so we're waiting for the final review to be done on the technical resolution for that airplane. That will be done here shortly. And then a group within the FAA called the FSB will determine what the proper training is for our pilots. We know that training our pilots is key to the solution for that airplane. And we talked about how pilots integrate with automation. That's also key. And those are things that we'll focus on at United Airlines. So I'm not sure I answered your question specifically. I hope I got close enough to it.
No, I think you were very helpful. I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is that you feel like this was a big enough problem that the aviation industry, essentially all parts of it, governmental regulators included, will come together and ensure that A, this kind of thing doesn't happen again, and B, that this particular situation is resolved.
I think that's accurate, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think it is interesting. You know, there's a lot of concern about that around the world, but we do have the safest system, and we always try to become safer every year. And there are a lot of really good people working really hard to get this thing sorted out in general aviation, business aviation, and clearly in the airlines. But we take safety across aviation as our #1 objective. And if you look at general aviation, it's twice as safe as it was just 20 years ago. The airlines have nearly a perfect record for the last dozen years or so, and we take that very seriously.
Yeah, if I can, but before you, if you go, if I could just say this, Mark. I mean, we wouldn't be in the United States if it weren't for AOPA and the support that Mark's leadership provides to the association. And we have a unique situation in the United States. There's just not many places in the world where pilots can learn to fly at a young age and have almost full access to the airspace out there in a way that allows them to gain the experience, and that's something that we have to fight for every day. And so, Mark, thanks to you, your leadership, and your organization for making sure that we preserve the right to fly in our skies.
It is a very unique airspace. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. My name is Dan. I fly for SkyWest, and I run a high school flight aviation program for students in Southern California. My question specifically you touched on was about the air traffic control system. I think it gets a really bad rap, especially of late. And my experience is that it's doing a pretty phenomenal job with the resources that it has. It's just a lot of the technology, as I've seen, is very, very antiquated. And compound that with the problem that Congress holds the purse strings for upgrading that system. I'm wondering if you could comment on efforts to secure the budget for that, how you think that is going, if you think that the funding that we're getting for that overhaul for the next gen system is adequate, if it needs to be larger than that. I don't have any concept of that. And I know it's going to take a lot of money to potentially overhaul that system. And I'd just like to know more about how you feel those efforts are going.
Yeah, look, I'll answer that by giving you my own personal view, Bryan Quigley's view, and I'm not saying this to represent United Airlines. And I think you understand why, but in my opinion, the FAA has a single-year appropriations methodology. That's really difficult because it's difficult to fund programs that are going to last generations if you only have a one-year budget cycle. The military has a four-year budget cycle. In my opinion, the biggest thing that would help with the FAA, and Mark, I know that you have an opinion, maybe it's different, but is that if we had a multi-year appropriation cycle for the FAA so that we can identify technologies, fund technologies, and get those technologies implemented in an efficient manner with the proper funding sources. We are making huge investments. The work that Mark's doing and others have done on the Next Gen Advisory Committee are identifying technologies that will lead us into the next century. He mentioned ADS-B, which you know from your experiences, Automated Dependent Broadcast System B, which means that we won't have to rely on radar sweeps to be able to see where the airplane is. There are satellite-based in some parts of the world, and then ground-based systems that will take transponder pings from airplanes and a multi-mode receiver, and to be able to see real-time where the airplane is, and it reduces the ambiguity between airplane movement and where the radar thinks that the airplane is. A lot of the issue is that the current technology in the FAA and the air traffic systems don't communicate effectively with each other. And so we need new automated systems. We got to be able to run the air traffic solution now with the systems that we have. But we also have to be able to prepare for the future about new automated systems. And this isn't a unique problem in the United States. It's this problem. I mean, if you think about where we've gone in 100 plus years of aviation, commercial aviation, we've moved the dial significantly in the amount of traffic, and we're going to grow even more, as Mark said. So, to me, those are the big constraints.
I just add what Brian's saying is, the FAA has a budget around $16-some billion a year that's funded pretty well completely from the excise tax and the fuel taxes and other things that basically make it a complete system. But having a multi-year funding would be something I think we all agree in the community, so you can work on longer term plans. It's pretty predictable right now, the funding. We just need to make it part of the budget. We agree with that. Over here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm from Houston, Texas, and it's a very diverse population. And I'm looking for some insight and some advice on just kind of funding programs. And some of our students cannot get enough to actually pay for flight time. Very smart kids can pass the FAA exam like with their eyes closed, but they can't afford flight time to actually get the check ride and things of that done. So I'm just trying to see what the industry is trying to do to kind of reach out to those brilliant kids that are in these diverse populations, but they can't come up with the financing no matter. I mean, we go to airports and we scrounge and we scrub, but we just cannot get the funding to get these kids to actually get the pilot's license like we're working towards. So I'm just trying to see what's the industry doing for like the diverse schools that we don't have the finance. I mean, I even finance my own way here and my education, but I can do it, but my kids can't. So we're trying to figure out how can I get, those guys the money so that we can get a successful program.
Yeah, thanks for that question. It's a great question. We see that the cost to get your commercial and your airline pilot type rating certificate, ATP certificate, is the single biggest barrier for pilots who want to work professionally. Even the cost of a private pilot license, as you all know, is pretty costly. And there are programs out there to help, but it's not enough. We're going to talk to you a little bit about Aviate, which is our pilot ecosystem work that we're doing. And what we hope to be able to do is to develop a financing solution that helps offset the cost. And so either offset the cost, provide a lower cost solution, or an efficient way to finance flight training education. So there'll be more information on Aviate as we develop the methodology around what that financing vehicle looks like. But I would encourage you to pay attention to the leadership panel when they're talking about Aviate and look for those opportunities. Yep.
So it's really an important one, and we have over $1 million of scholarships we hand out, but it's still a drop in the bucket, which is needed. And we did this last year. 20 of those scholarships went to teachers because we want to have that multiplier effect that go in this room, as well as 80 students or more. But there's a couple of technologies coming along that we're really excited about. Actually worked here in Denver as George By and the E-Flyer, the flight training aircraft, which will probably be certified by the FAA within the next 18 months or so. We'll be able to stay in the air for, call it 3 hours or so, operate at $25 an hour is what they're projecting right now, as compared to even a 172 today, which might be closer to $90 to $100 an hour. So it could take the cost of getting your private license down, and most of your training then is quiet, not using fuels in the airport environment. You can learn a lot with that aircraft and reduce the cost. So there are others coming along like that I'm really excited about, to take the cost down from maybe $10,000 from a private pilot's license to maybe closer to $4,000 or $5,000 in the coming years. So there are technologies, there's solutions, and I know we're all working on trying to find other ways that we can help people get through that little knothole. The other thing I also say is becoming a flight instructor today is a great way to pay for part of it, because there are great pay available for flight instructors, quite a bit different, 4 or 5 times higher than it was just 10 years ago. We got time for one more question around this side, and I think we have to wrap it up, because I'm not going to be the one that makes this airline late.
Wow, I am so excited to be in this forum today. I'm Birmingham City Councilman John Hilliard, and we made a real push to create really to get aviation in our school system. Well, they weren't moving fast enough for me, so we decided to create a charter school. So we've been putting that in place, and this has been a plethora of information. It's almost overload. It's so much information, and I just want to thank all of you for being so giving. I think we produced a commercial. My office and I have my staff over. If they're over, they better stand up, because I want people to see them. They're all young. They're 25 and 26, and they've been working really hard on this. But the video that we produced went viral, and another group from Oklahoma, and I want to see where is that group, because they invited us here. That's how we got here. Where are you in the house? I know you are here. Omaha. Yes, stand up, over in the corner. They're the reason that we are here. They called us, they saw our information, they saw our video, we put it on social media, and we just got really excited and decided to come and really get involved. And you've been great in giving us information to help empower us. The other thing is that last night, before you go in, I went to the bar. And at the bar talk, you meet a lot of different people. And one guy said to me, he says, well, and I want you to answer this. He said to us, he said, well, there's only about 20 years left in the pilot business, because everything is going to become super automated. And I realize that automation is really moving really fast. And I want to know for you, how important will these aviation jobs be over the next 20 years with all the automation that's coming on board? Thank you.
Yeah, great question, and thanks for what you're doing in Birmingham and in Omaha. Thank you for leading our young people into the profession. I think automation is something that we're going to have to continuously develop. If the question is, do I ever see a situation where there are not pilots in the cockpit, I don't see that yet. We do see, as Mark mentioned, I've done a lot of stuff in Washington on advisory committees. The government relies heavily on the industry for federal advisory committees where they can advise them on solutions. That's what Mark and I serve on the Next Gen Advisory Committee. One of the ones that I served on, I was the chair of the Drone Advisory Committee subcommittee. And so the FAA is really moving forward with technology to support commercial operations using drone technology. You'll hear a lot of desire and pressure from companies that are transportation companies to provide some sort of drone-operated lift similar to these transportation network companies that are providing, and I won't mention them by name, but are providing transportation. I rode one from the airport to the hotel last night, but no laugh. You'll hear a lot of information about those companies, and we've worked at United Airlines with some of those companies so that they can see what we do from the safety side. I think we're a long ways from that. I think in my lifetime, you may see something like that. I don't know that you're going to see commercial airline operations without pilots in the cockpit. You know, kind of the next step, logical step of this would be that they went down, and I'm not advocating for this because I am a pilot. I currently fly. I'm an Airbus captain for United when I'm not doing my day job. But probably the next step of this is to go to single pilot operations where the aircraft, the system, and the pilot health are intensely monitored on the ground through an operation similar to the way that the military runs drone operations. And so that the airplane can be flown by folks on the ground if it needed to. But the investment in that type of technology is not there yet, and that's way off in the future.
You know, I concur with what Bryan said on that, you know, Sully and Jeff Skiles, who landed in the Hudson, their first seaplane landing in an airliner, there's not probably going to be a button or an automation that says, when you hit the flock of geese, the machine will do this. That oversight and that skill that was learned at an aviating stage to take control of that aircraft and make a difference and save every passenger with just wet socks and shoes is unique to the way we train in the United States in every aspect. We want automation. We want to make the job easier, better, safer, and more reliable. But there is nothing that will replace a hand at the stick that can make split-second decisions that can deal with all the variables that can occur in aviation. So with that, I want to thank Bryan and the United team for hosting this great event, kicking it off. Lots ahead. Thank you for what you do. Have a great symposium.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you so much, Bryan. Thank you, Mark. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bryan. And thanks to all of you for your great questions and the great work that you're out there doing on behalf of young people and aviation. I'm going to switch gears for just a few moments and bring you an update on the AOPA High School initiative. I know we've got quite a few teachers here today who are currently using our high school curriculum. Would you mind standing up? Don't be shy. We're all friends. Yeah. All right, so now I am going to throw you under the bus a little bit. Look around, guys. Look for these people. They know what it's like to teach this in a classroom. They've got experience, and I think many of them would be very, very happy to answer your questions. Many of them have a badge, a ribbon attached to their badge that identifies them as one of our high school teachers. So please talk to them, take advantage of their knowledge, and thank you so much for all that you're doing. So let's talk a little bit about why this is the right moment to be talking about bringing aviation education into your schools. You definitely heard it from Mark and Bryan there. United alone is looking at 10,000 new pilots in the next few years. That's incredible. Mark mentioned that Boeing is projecting that we're going to need 212,000 new pilots in North America alone in the next 20 years, 193,000 technicians. And that need's only going to grow because we are not going to stop flying. We're not going to stop traveling. We're not going to stop manufacturing things. You might be surprised to know that in order to make one tennis ball, it takes materials from 14 countries that travel 50,000 miles. That's not going away. You know, worldwide, 657 million packages are transported in a single day. That's not going away either. So there's going to be a lot of demand, and it's going to continue. When we created this program, we really wanted to increase student awareness of opportunities in aviation and give them a chance to engage with those opportunities at a young age. High school is a really special moment in students' lives. They're making decisions about their future that are going to stick with them. Will I go to college? Where will I go to college? What will I study? What will my career path look like? So it's an optimal moment for us to reach them. We also really wanted to lower barriers. You know, we wanted more people from different kinds of backgrounds with different kinds of life experiences to be able to discover the opportunities that aviation has to offer. And so we created this program with 3 elements. The first is our scholarship program, which Mark is absolutely right. We're lucky to be able to give away a lot of money, but it's a drop in the bucket of what's needed. The second piece is our aviation STEM curriculum, which many of you here are using, and I hope others of you are interested in. And then finally is this event, our annual symposium. So let's start with scholarships for a minute. This year, thanks to the generosity of the Ray Foundation, we had the chance to give 100 scholarships of $10,000 each. So enough to get someone from the very beginning through flight training. We gave 80 of those to students, but as Mark mentioned, we gave 20 of them to teachers because we know that you're a force multiplier in your classroom. There is nothing like a student being able to talk to a teacher who has that experience and can share that real life joy of flying. So we checked in with them 3 months after they got their money. And in that relatively short time, 42 had already soloed, 30 had passed an FAA written test, and another 13 had already earned their private pilot certificates. The next scholarship cycle is going to open in January, and I strongly encourage all of you and all of your students to apply. You just have to visit AOPA.org. We'll have the applications there, along with all of the criteria, so please do that. So what does it mean to win a scholarship? One of our teachers, Carla Ladner, who's actually here with us today, was one of our winners, and she was good enough to share her story.
The day of the scholarship, I had just finished 3 hours of flight lessons. I was eating lunch with one of my students and her mother out at the airport, and we were calculating the cost. After 6 hours and the money that we had spent, we had decided that that was probably going to be it. It was becoming too expensive, and got home that afternoon and discussed it with my husband, and he had said, yeah, I looked at the bank account today. I don't know that we can continue this. It was depressing. It was sad. We were both a little bit down about it. And about 4 hours later, I went through my email, and I opened up my email, and a little hesitant about clicking on it, but it said congratulations. And all I could say was Rodney, my husband. And he immediately ran to me, and he saw it on the screen. And we both cried. It's to get that back after you thought you had lost it for 4 hours, that gift is unbelievable.
Yeah. And Carla is really putting her scholarship to good use. She is flying, and she is inspiring her students so much that they come out to the airport just to watch her train. I mean, that's pretty great. So if you use our STEM curriculum, what are we offering? I'm going to keep this at a pretty high level. There are 2 pathways. One is for piloting. One is for unmanned aircraft systems, better known as drones. We're offering 4 years of curriculum. The idea is 9th through 12th grade, and of course, each course level is designed with the appropriate level of rigor for students of that age. Because this is all about lowering barriers, our system is very flexible. Schools get to decide how many courses they use, and they decide where and to what grade level they offer them. So a school might offer the 9th grade course to all students, 9th through 12th. They might start in the 10th grade. Lots of options. We want this to suit you to meet your school's needs. It is to be used as a credit-bearing course during school hours rather than an after-school program. And it's designed to prepare students for either the FAA private pilot test or for the Part 107 remote pilot test. Thanks to the donations that we get through the AOPA Foundation, this is really the most amazing part. We can offer it to you completely free of charge. There is absolutely no cost for the curriculum. So how does this work? How are we growing it? We began development back in 2016. That was the first time we started putting the courses together. The following year, we field tested that initial round of courses in the 9th grade and began developing 10th grade. In 2018, we were able to offer those 9th grade courses to high schools all over the country. Today, both the 9th and the 10th grade are available. We're field testing 11th, and that's the pattern we're going to continue until we have all 4 grades completed. So this map shows what our current usage looks like. The text is small, don't worry about reading it. What I really want you to take away from it is that the program is gaining traction all across the country, and that the majority of schools who are using the program are teaching more than 1 grade. So they've taught it, they've found it valuable, and they're taking it further. How does that measure up in terms of numbers? Today, the program is in more than 160 schools in 34 states, and more than 5,000 students are using it. Altogether, more than 8,000 students have used it since we started. All right, this was something that we got a question about and that Bryan and Mark touched on. When it comes to meeting aviation workforce needs, we've got to start talking to people who have not traditionally been part of the aviation community. We've got to start reaching folks we've not done a good job of reaching in the past. Women are a really important part of that. FAA statistics tell us that only about 7% of active pilots are female today. But in our classes, 22% of the students using these courses and learning about aviation and discovering the opportunities are female. We've got a really unique opportunity at this moment to show these young women that there's a career opportunity for them here, that there's a place for them in aviation. Something really similar is happening among students of color. The US Department of Labor says 8% of professional pilots are people of color. 38% of our students come from these traditionally underrepresented groups. And I think that's really, really good news for the future of our aviation workforce. Lesson resources. I'm going to keep this again at a very high level. You'll have an opportunity to learn more. But what we offer you is really everything you need to teach this course successfully, even if you're not a pilot. So when you sign up to use our curriculum, you're going to get lesson plans, you're going to get presentations, student activities and projects, student assessments, teacher notes and aids, everything that you need. So let's talk a little bit about each of the courses that's available now. The 9th grade curriculum really provides the foundation for exploring both manned flying and drones. We're going to incorporate engineering practices throughout the year, and we keep students engaged with some really fun project-based learning. That bottom picture that you see on that slide, that's actually teachers at one of our workshops building hot air balloons. Another great one is that we give our students some marshmallow peeps, if you're familiar with them, and we tell them they have to build a habitat for those peeps to survive on Mars. And you'd be amazed at the really creative, fun solutions they come up with. So 9th grade covers a whole range of career opportunities, not just flying. It gives kind of a historical context for what's happening in aviation today. And we have career planning embedded throughout. So students get thinking early about how they might want to use this knowledge and put it to work for themselves. Then in 10th grade, we tackle what might be considered the first half of ground school. But we do it in a way that builds a much deeper understanding. There's no rote memorization happening here. Again, we cover both manned aircraft and drones. We spend a lot of time talking about aircraft design, construction, the physics of flight, aircraft controls, aircraft systems. We have simulation activities embedded throughout the year, and you do not have to do 9th grade to teach 10th grade. Okay, 11th grade. This is where the pathway is really split off. We've kept that information together for students up to this point. But in 11th grade, we start with completely separate content. So for the pilot track, we keep building on ground school. We focus on things like weather, airport operations, navigation, decision-making, aeromedical factors. We keep up the hands-on activities and the simulation, and we focus on reviewing for the private pilot knowledge test. This is one I do recommend that you teach 10th grade first, because there's a big hunk of that knowledge that happens in 10th grade. All right, on the UAS side, the content's a little different. We're gonna focus on communications, drone systems, drone performance, human factors, and of course, those unique regulations for drones. And again, we're gonna do a focused review for the Part 107 knowledge test. How can you use it? It's pretty simple. You apply online at AOPA's website. The application period is gonna open in December. It will go through February 28th. And then if you're new to the program, or you're teaching a grade level you haven't taught before, we're gonna ask you to do a 3-day professional development workshop. And those are gonna be held in the spring. All right, this is very high level. We've just touched on a lot of things, but you're gonna be able to find out a lot more, especially today in some of our breakout sessions. If you've got detailed questions, you really wanna understand how it's all put together, I recommend you go to our STEM curriculum presentation at 11 in this room. And if you wanna try out some of those activities with teachers who are actually using them in classrooms, go to one of our Dig Deeper sessions. All right, so we talked about scholarships, we talked about curriculum, but we can't forget this event. This is the third part of our initiative. So it keeps growing every year, thanks to you. You're already here, and I don't want to waste your time talking about it. I want you to get out there and do it. But I do want to encourage you to stay around for our closing session tomorrow. That's when we're going to tell you when and where we will convene next year. All right, I hope that was helpful to you. We have a few housekeeping tips before we head off into those breakout sessions. If you're not in a session in this room, all the breakouts are upstairs. So you're gonna wanna head out of these doors behind you and take a right, and then just follow the floor signs. I do wanna remind everybody that this is an active training facility. There's pilot training going on here right now, today. So just be respectful of that, and if you can keep it down in the hallways a little bit, that would probably be appreciated. If anyone needs to use an elevator rather than the stairs, please see any AOPA staff member, and we'll help you out. So, have a great morning, enjoy the breakouts, and thank you so much for your attention.
Mama said